What's up guys, Infinity here and welcome back to another YouTube video. Have you ever wondered what it would be like not to be the hero in a video game? And I'm not like talking about a villain either, just like straight up an NPC. Well, that's what we're going to be finding out today in this game called Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor. Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor is a pretty interesting game. You play as a janitor, cleaning up a popular spaceport as the lowest social class in an RPG world. And today I'm going to be describing my experiences of going through the game completely blind. The first thing you see when you boot up the game is the home menu. The game's art style uses a mixture of mostly 2D character sprites in a 3D world, and the 3D models are all pixelated as if they were in a PS1 game, which results in an aesthetic that I really like. We start up a new save and pick a god to follow. Even after playing the game, I'm not really sure what effect this has other than just getting set god shrine in your house. Now, finally entering the gameplay, we find ourselves in the spaceport. The spaceport is unexpectedly incomprehensible to navigate around, and I found myself constantly getting lost at first. I didn't use this until much later, but I highly recommend just starting the game off with a fan-made map open. Before looking at it, I had no idea that the spaceport was circular, and also connects through multiple sides. As a janitor, it's your job to pick up random items on the ground and burn them. You come equipped with an incinerator, which is able to destroy most items. After walking around for a bit and talking to some NPCs, I found a treasure map for the dungeons. In the center of the spaceport is the dungeon, the main attraction for all the dungeon-going heroes that travel through the spaceport. I spent some of my extremely limited money to buy an iron beb, and eating it allows me to enter the dungeon. Inside of the dungeon, we find Mega Man Legends! The inside of the dungeon is one of the best looking parts of the game, looking like an extremely clean PS1 game. Once you enter the dungeon, the gameplay switches from the Paper Mario third-person controls to a first-person WASD and mouse controls. After opening up an extremely slow-moving and loud door, we get jump-scared by this goofy skull thing and the day suddenly ends. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in my house and the skull is now following me. Before leaving, I interact with a terminal in my room. He gives me credits for every item that I incinerated yesterday. Outside, we meet this girl who tells me that I'm cursed and need to collect 3 tablets to cure myself. Before doing the tablet quest, I decide to walk around the spaceport and try to learn my surroundings. I end up completely failing at this, and I also spend a lot of time talking to every shopkeeper, which is pointless since they change their stock every day. However, different sections of the spaceport have different vendors that sell specific types of items, though I never really realized this until much later. Ending this extremely productive day off, I'm forced to write in my diary and fall asleep. The second day is more the same, though this is about the point where we start to interact with this game's gender mechanic. This game has a system where you can go to these machines and buy a new gender. This has zero effect on anything, other than the screen starting to look distorted when you haven't changed genders in a while. Playing this game, I genuinely cannot tell whether this game is making a statement against or for LGBTQ. Instead, I think rather than making a political statement, it's only here for the sake of being random. In terms of what it actually adds to the gameplay, it doesn't really do much. You can still play the game while the screen is distorted, it's just slightly annoying. Having to spend money on periodically changing your gender doesn't really accomplish anything that the hunger mechanic already doesn't. And speaking of the hunger mechanic, this game has a hunger system. As time passes, you'll get hungrier, and you won't be able to go to sleep if you're too hungry. You'll have to eat on a daily basis, and there's a lot of food items for sale from the various vendors at the spaceport. Most of these food items are extremely overpriced. There's a bordering button that you can press to randomly increase or decrease the price by a slight amount, but this has an extremely minimal effect that doesn't change the fact that most food items were disgustingly overpriced. Unlike the gender mechanic, you can't really ignore the hunger mechanic since you won't be able to sleep at the end of the day without eating. Luckily, there were some food items that were significantly cheaper than the rest, and from what I could tell, there's literally zero reason to buy the more expensive items, ignoring a couple of items that would make you sick, but not every cheap food item does that. I understand that the point of this mechanic is probably to highlight how the janitor is in a lower class than the heroes traveling through the spaceport and buying the expensive items, but that doesn't really change the fact that the system is completely unbalanced and gives you zero incentive to buy any food item other than the cheapest option that won't get you sick. Towards the end of the second day is when I encountered a really bad bug. Every few seconds, the screen would freeze for a moment. This made the game nearly impossible to play. After somehow making it back to my house to save, I closed the game and reopened it, which fixed the issue. After playing through multiple save files, this issue seemed to trigger towards the end of the second day, and then again after a large multi-day gaps of the lag not happening. It's an extremely bad bug that renders the game almost impossible to play, but luckily goes away once you restart the game. So I keep playing the game for a few more in-game days. I try to sell the items that I find on the ground to the merchants across the spaceport, but this mostly ends up in confusion of me trying to figure out where to go to find a merchant to buy a specific item. After getting annoyed with the game, I took a small break from playing it. After coming back, I decided to start a new playthrough, now with more experience and using a map I found online. As I said earlier, I highly recommend just starting with a fan-made map open, since the spaceport is extremely confusing to navigate if you don't know the layout. In this new playthrough, I decided to focus more on praying to the gods and incinerating trash rather than trading items. Praying to each god once a day, and only once a day, it actually hurts your luck if you do it multiple times in the same day, will give you extra luck, which will help you in finding better items on the ground. Dropping off certain items like candles as offerings in front of a god's shrine also boosts your luck. I focused the start of my game just to increase my luck, which should help me find better items for the later story quests. At the end of the second day, I got the same glitch I got earlier where the game would heavily lag until I sleep to the third day and then restart the game, which was still very annoying. This shouldn't be an issue with my PC since the game runs completely fine most of the time. It just starts randomly lagging when it becomes night sometimes, but only sometimes. However, I haven't seen anyone else talk about this issue, so maybe it's an obscure glitch related to a specific component of my PC, and also this game isn't really that talked about in the first place. Anyways, after raising my luck a bit, I decide to actually start the story quest. Each of the 3 tablet fragments that I need for removing my course are tied to their own objectives. For one, I need to obtain the statue of every god in the game, which I have to either randomly find on the floor or get lucky enough to get from the daily lotto machines. This will likely be something I will be passively working on while doing the other quests. For the second quest, I need to obtain a copy of Gardeners of the Galaxy and give it to the slime dude, probably the most straightforward of the quests. The third quest is to venture back into the dungeons and find the fragment somewhere in there. This means we'll have to buy another iron beb to eat and enter the dungeon. Now that I've gotten some money from playing for a few days, I'm going to buy a copy of Gardeners of the Galaxy. However, I bought the wrong issue, so I had to go back and buy it again. This isn't part of the actual game story or anything, I genuinely just bought the wrong issue. After grinding for some items and money, I finally decided to buy an iron beb and go back into a dungeon. A path that was previously blocked off is now open, which leads me through this confusing series of paths. I'm told that I'm being hunted, and I keep walking forward until this entity appears and I wake up back outside. I'm assuming that I failed and need to go back into the dungeon again. Over the course of the next hour, I grinded some more money and went back down to the dungeon a few times. It took a shocking amount of tries, but I finally made it to the end of the maze and got the second tablet piece. Now, all I need are the statues. I spent the next few days grinding, slowly gaining the statues while also making some decent money. At about this point, I noticed that the different districts of the spaceport each sold specific types of items, even if the individual items were different each day. Selling cloth and rare spell switches tended to be pretty easy and gave a decent amount of credits for the effort that it took. I also occasionally found alternate currencies that could be traded in at the bank. There's also credit chips that you can sometimes find and add to your account through the machines on the walls. If it hasn't become clear yet, this game is extremely tedious and grindy. It's painful to play, but I also started to kind of enjoy it. I don't know if I've been Stockholm syndromed to keep playing this, but I actually started to find some enjoyment in the tedium. Walking around the spaceport started to become relaxing, and the art style, combined with the soundtrack, really created a unique atmosphere. And by this point, I was able to walk around the port without using a map. I started to get more used to the simple task of incinerating trash, and knowing the values of different items and which ones to keep added some depth to it. Regardless of any issues that I might have with the gameplay, it's undeniable that this game's vibe goes hard. Just take a look at some of these scenes. Eventually, I found the last statue that I needed for sale at a store and was able to buy it since I had gained a decent amount of credits on my account. With this, I finally had everything I needed to get the Thor tablet piece and complete the item. So I talked to this guy on the street to put the tablet pieces together. The tablet has a quest written on it, and my course will get transferred to whoever takes the quest. So now, I'll need to find an adventurer to take on the quest written on the tablet and pass the course to. Throughout the spaceport, I found 3 different adventurers who were willing to take the quest, but I also had to pay them. The first adventurer I found wanted 5 mega batteries. I haven't found a single one yet, so this one might be a bit difficult. The second adventurer wanted a Mystic Spell Watch, which is a super rare item. After looking it up online, apparently this guy in the spaceport that I've been giving all of my containers to throughout my playthrough will actually give you a Mystic Spell Watch at 150 containers, which seems doable with how many containers I've already given him. The third adventurer straight up just wants 650 credits, which I'm shockingly close to. If all else fails, I'll just pay him the credits. I spent the next few hours grinding up some credits while getting some more containers. At the rate I'm making credits, it looks like I'll be able to hire the adventurer in another day or two. But then suddenly, this happened. By some sort of orangey miracle, I somehow find a Mystic Spells Watch on the ground. I go to my house and save before hiring the adventurer, and it's time for the end of the game. My curse is finally lifted, and I spend one final day going around town. Being able to walk around without the skull constantly flying around me and screaming felt more satisfying than it should have. When I went to sleep at night, the skull appeared in my room and started talking to me. It told me that I could escape the spaceport and go to space with the adventurer that I had hired earlier, and I follow it outside. I keep walking, even past the ship, until I'm standing high above the edge of the ground and the game fades into the credits. I think this was an interesting ending. You could take this as a happy ending in which the janitor is finally able to leave and live a life outside of the spaceport, or you could interpret it as a more darker ending with how the protagonist is quote-unquote freed by walking off the edge of the spaceport. However, what I didn't like about the ending is how the extreme lag glitch from earlier was happening again during the entirety of the outside portion of the ending. It made what would otherwise would have been a more enjoyable conclusion frustrating. I even tried restarting the game, but apparently it didn't save when I went to sleep at night, because the cutscene I guess, so I had to replay the final day. Thank God I saved after getting that Mystic Spells Watch instead of going straight to the adventurer. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that the lag glitches really make the game less enjoyable, though keep in mind what I said earlier. Since I haven't seen anyone else experience this issue, this could just be an obscure glitch related to my hardware. On the other hand, this is also a very unpopular game with minimal documentation. But in the end, did I enjoy the game? In a sort of twisted way, yes. As purposefully painful and grindy this game was, I'm actually glad that I played it. However, it's not something that I'd recommend to most people. The vast majority of people who play this game will probably hate it. It's an extremely experimental game that's purposefully monotonous and dull. If that does not sound appealing to you, you will not enjoy this game. If you think that's a genius idea and you want to experience Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor as an experimental art experience, then you might have some fun like I did. There's also some achievements you can get if you want a reason to keep playing after the credits, which you can do. One achievement that I found interesting was tied to losing every single other achievement that you've unlocked. And yes, there is an item in the game that sometimes unlocks a random achievement when you use it, except sometimes it doesn't and causes you to lose every other achievement. Again, your opinion on matters like these game mechanics will really affect whether you despise or love this game. If you think that's a stupid game mechanic, you might not like this game. If you think that's epic, this might be your type of game. Despite its strange mechanics and glitches, I still had a lot of fun playing Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor, and depending on how messed up your taste in video games is, you might too. But what I know for sure is that you'll take a lot of enjoyment in subscribing to my YouTube channel. I'm infinityJKA, and I'll see you all in my next YouTube video.